Are we up? Are we good? Awkward eye contact? Do we? Still?
I mean, I'm fine with this the whole talk.
So we're going to be talking about Iran. Anybody know why they picked the cat for Iran? I actually don't know. That was a legitimate question. You'll find this. I'm the stupidest person in the room, so when I ask a question, I really do want to know.
It's probably because CrowdStrike picked all the big ones already.
Wait, was it? Well, I guess no. They do the kit thing for Iran too, don't they?
All right. Well, then maybe they just ran out of ideas.
It's CrowdStrike's fault.
Yeah.
A lion? So okay, so the national animal of Iran is a lion. I did not know that. So a kitten would be the appropriate way to pejoratively phrase them. Got it. This makes sense. Now, how do we get past the kitten, though? Here's the question. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, but it usually pops up in the top, and it's not doing that. I am going to display settings. Wait, is it in the settings? Arrangement. Here we go. Mirror displays. Something happened. Woo! Again, I'm done. All right, adversarial emulation. No applause for that one, all right. All right, hold on, let's take a moment. This is the last talk you will ever see at Derbycon. First of all, I'm sorry that it's mine. So, ending on a low note. It's your fault. What was that? Don't stop talking. It'll last forever. We'll see how that goes. So, how to serve SME. Come on, some of you are old enough to have seen The Twilight Zone, right? There are no experts in this space. I'm not going to pretend to be one. But I do get the microphone. So fundamentally, this entire talk is going to be discussing the fact that I think that there is a different approach to how we need to look at red teaming. Part of this is going to be concept. I really like philosophy. I think all too often in this space, we spend a lot of time getting really technically deep. And we miss the point of, did we need to spend that much effort in that direction? What's the most common access technique out in the world, period? Phishing. Click on an email. Why does it work? Because people click on the email, right? The Nigerian prince is still a Nigerian prince because it works. I don't have to be clever. We don't have to be clever to win. Statistics are in our favor. Email is a system that I can send one email or I can send 1 million emails, and there's very little cost difference as an attacker to do that. So if I'm sending 1 million emails and I just keep sending 1 million emails, I mean, somebody's going to click on them, right? I was talking to a CISO last year, and we're all trying to get some sort of metrics. Has anybody seen a metric on security that means anything? They don't exist. Why do you think we have entire products that just give you colors? Your security is polka dot yellow. Whoa, it's diseased. And he was so excited because he'd implemented phishing training. So first of all, he was just excited he had a metric. And he's like, we baselined, 32% of employees clicked on an email. Those fucking morons. He didn't say that. That's me. That's more my personality. I apologize to the children. Didn't I almost throw up her? Oh, fuck, it's even warmer. Is it because it says ego on the slide? In this community, we're a little too much driven by ego, Walter. And then you get to throw it up. This is how you find out your insides.
The true insider's bread.
I did have to wrestle with my earlier icing today where that was exactly what was about to happen.
You want a whiskey chaser?
Yes. If you're going to do something, you should go all in or don't do it. Right?
I'm not exchanging. You guys.
I actually don't know what this is. This is an alcohol. You sacrifice for your craft. Can I can I emulate this part? Virtual Bryson drinks it. %32 clicked on this phishing training. Baseline. And he was like, then he was really excited. And then we've been doing it. We've been doing this training. We've been doing this training. We've been doing this training. And finally, Nate stopped clicking on things. We got down to 27%. What up, bitches? And I'm like, but still above zero. Only takes one in, right? 27% times a million is what? A number. We need to not be driven by winning. We need to not be driven by our egos. We need to not be driven by what seems sexy technically. What we need to be driven by is what actually gets results. What matters? If it doesn't matter, why are you doing it? So pretty much, we're going to have Walter running around to your job sites, and if you're not doing something, you're going to get iced. So I'm Bryson, this is me. I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I founded Grim. I just launched Scythe, and actually just kind of a cool little story about that. Last Derbycon, so we're 1 year old, and Derbycon was our first conference as a vendor ever. And at Derbycon, with a handshake with John Strand at Black Hills, was our first customer. So, I mean, we all like to talk about the fun parts of Derbycon, but there's also a business side of this too. And so I always say we'll have a special place because Derbycon really was our first customer. And then I co-founded the ICS Village, which is a nonprofit that does critical infrastructure education and awareness. And I'm the unicorn. So if you ever see a grown man running around looking like an idiot, that's me. So, some more quick background on that. I'm not gonna shill whatsoever. I assure you. Just what set me on to this talk was a few years ago. A large corporation who you all know and shop at came to us because they had pretty much run to the end of the rainbow of being able to measure their defense. So they're like, hey, like, could you build us a one-off implant that like does this thing? And I was like, wait, hold on. So the amount of effort it's taken for you to get through your bullshit procurement process to come talk to me, you've done all of this research, because I'm going to give, boys and girls, I'm going to give you some great life advice. The best ideas are when somebody else gives them to you. And they gave me one. That's what led to Scythe. And what came out of that is I realized, because the problem with cybersecurity is, again, the metrics. We can't measure anything. We can measure things with time, but like, how do you measure security? Right? That's why we do red teaming. That's why we do penetration testing. We are just trying to continue to find little elements of this stuff, but it's snapshots in time. Where do we actually get something that, when I figure it out today, it's still true tomorrow? And I realized it's because when we're looking at the entire scope of an attack, that's infinite. There are an infinite number of ways to gain access. They don't have to be technical. Again, I don't think of phishing as a technical attack. It's social engineering. Or I put something on a USB stick and you plug it in for me. Or I break into your company and I just log on. Or I pay somebody, insider threat, to do it, right? There's an unlimited number of ways to just show up. But here's the thing. Unless you're living in your mother's basement, you don't just pop shell and drop mic and be like, well, that was cool. Anybody do that? Because I've gained access to your system doesn't mean I've done anything yet. All I've done is open the door and walked in. It's what I do next. That entire chain actually is finite. And so this is where I came up with this idea called the bounded attack philosophy. I first unveiled this at ShmooCon a couple of years ago. And back to metrics, out of the several hundred people who suffered through my half-baked idea back then, pretty much only 2 people told me not that I should kill myself. So that's a good start. Still alive. But it's contentious to point out some of these things, because I think a lot of times we don't want to question. So what I came up with is, first of all, why in cybersecurity is this the only industry or discipline that I know of in all of humankind where we cry? Like little babies. Where somebody else knows my things better than I do. Why? That doesn't seem right. And then I realized there's one space that's not true about this. Because attackers cannot defeat the laws of physics. Nobody can yet. When I go on wires, I am ones and zeros like everybody else that is a 1 and 0. I can't do anything about that as an attacker. I have to use electrical impulses or optics, right, for transmission. Layer 1 is always layer 1. Nobody can be clever at layer 1. Where I'm clever is where I try to hide within the communication protocols from layer 2 up. But here's the thing. I can only talk in the protocols that you already have in your environment, right? The natural pattern of life, the way that your business, everybody is already speaking and doing those things. I can't be something else. If I showed up with some super secret squirrel protocol, like, you don't have to speak Russian to know I'm not speaking English, because that's what everyone else is doing. Communication protocols are a finite space. The new ones don't just come out. And the defender chooses what those are. I have to blend in with what you're doing. I can't bring something else to the table. Finite access. The next one is behaviors. Attackers actually do the same thing over and over and over and over. We're seeing interesting techniques, but at the end of the day, the behaviors are the same. And there's a limited number of behaviors you care about. And so my assertion, which underpins all of this, and I'm still working on a lot of the research because the behavioral side is where we start going down some rabbit holes, is we can bound the attack space by you can only talk a certain way and you only do certain things. And those are both finite axes, which gives me a Cartesian plane that this is where you will be. You're not going to surprise me tomorrow because I know where you're going to go. I mean, not me personally. I mean, the stupid look isn't faked. Going back to our earlier thing about the fish and the access, what is the largest risk exposure in your environment?
The people.
The people. How many solutions in this industry actually address the people side? As I walk among the people. I remember meeting you last night. You're regretting that decision now, aren't you?
Probably not many.
Not many. I don't know any. We are fond of creating nerd solutions for nerd problems. You know what? If I ever do a stand-up routine again, I just want you there. Yeah. Keep your shirt on, but keep laughing like that. It's the people. Now, do not conflate the humor here of what the average user looks like with the fact that it is not the user's fault. Users are using computers the way they were intended. Right? It's not my fault I clicked on an email. There is nobody on this planet that is sophisticated or smart enough all of the time to never get fooled by a fish. I'm sorry. They can be that good. You are using the computer the way it is intended. That is the purpose. So if you are not looking at how people are using computers in your environment from an attack perspective, you're missing most of the understanding of what's your risk. All right. Oh, I feel like that's actually in the title. All right, 15 minutes in. All right, red team and penetration testing. Just quickly, the way I simplify it so we don't get confused about semantics and afterward you can say it was the ISIS fault that I came up with something this stupid. Pen testing is looking at system hardening where how do I technically exploit something to gain access? Red team is all of the post-access, well, correction, doesn't have to be post-access, but red teaming is going beyond I just got on a box to I should understand what is the enterprise risk exposure and what is the contextual risk to that. So, red teams today tend to be exploitation focused. We love our shells. Crown jewels. This is simplifying things again. I'm a simple person. But today's red team is mostly, and there's a lot of reasons why, there are constraints, right? We do not have unlimited time, we do not have unlimited budget. Customers, for some reason, keep complaining about money. I would love to have a customer just come to me and be like, write a number and do that red team. And I'll be like, $10 million every year. And then I don't have to give talks ever again. But so today's red, what's that?
We thought you loved us.
Atlas, I'm glad it has your name on your shirt. Is that in case you get lost?
It's because you're speaking.
It's because I'm speaking? But I can't read. Okay, so today's red team simplistically is all too often is a very surgical perspective for a lot of the reasons that there are constraints on it, which is I get in, one-to-one, boom, own domain, drop mic, peace out. It works to a certain degree, except for a lot of enterprises are having fatigue about that. They're like, they won again, of course. What did I learn? Stuff. Guess how much of that stuff I'm actually going to fix the next time the red teamers come back? All of you who do pen testing and red teaming, how often do you see the same things with those clients over and over again? Raise your hands if you see it all the time, every single time. It's like, why did you even pay me to do the test? I could have just taken the report from last year. We're all trapped in this cycle where we are going down together. And a lot of that, again, is that's not how a real-world adversary works. This is one of the things that we need to understand when we also look at things like capture the flag. Understand that capture the flag is a game. It is a game that has walls, that those walls should be as hard to see as possible, but those walls are really finite because, again, we don't allow a capture the flag to last over 3 years, for example. Do we know adversaries that have that kind of time frame? Do we know adversaries that say, like, think of things in terms of millennia as an entire culture? Huh. So what do you think they're doing when they're actually doing attacks? Do you think they're following that same cultural understanding? Exactly, little baby. Internal red teams, right? Repeated engagements. A lot of a red team's administrative overhead is when DevSecOps or DevOps or the blue team or the SOC is like, hey, we're pushing out this thing. Could you validate it before we go out? I mean, it's not even like really red teaming, but that's an administrative requirement that happens when you're internally in an organization. And then external red teams, we love them because there's this unique other perspective. One of the things I always try to push with clients here is a lot of clients really like the black box perspective, right? You're going to start from nothing because I want to know everything that you can do. Only, with this like limited time frame and budget, and so that'll be a real adversarial equivalent when you think about how many tens of thousands to millions of dollars to assets throughout the entire world and amount of research they're doing before they even actually conduct the test, compared to a consulting company. Huh. Maybe it's easier just to let's do white box where we move it down so we can focus more on understanding what's actually happening on your enterprise as opposed to just what's your posture. And the other final piece is when you're doing an assessment, it's a snapshot. We go back to the ability to measure things. Understand a limited engagement that's like 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever that is, that's a snapshot in time. How many variables influenced that result? Right? Susie not coming into work turned out to be a bad thing, whereas Bobby did, and everything got screwed up during that assessment. The standard deviation of what did we actually learn is a question mark. We don't know. All right. Adversary. That was on purpose, because I wanted to show how the Russians were fucking with me in real time. So what do we want when we do an adversarial emulation? First of all, we want something that is customizable. It needs to change based on what we're trying to demonstrate. The purpose of adversarial emulation is understanding the contours of what's really going on in that defensive environment, particularly if you spell it correctly. Repeatable. We want to be able to share this. Kill chain insight, when I'm talking about those contours, it's not that I win, but it's that I understand where the choke points and where those apertures are very wide and where they're very narrow. And you can do simple tricks to move beyond those. If you think again what an adversary can do, adversaries can steal certs and sign their own software, making it look legitimate. Does anybody in this room do that? The FBI is right back there. No, we don't. That's illegal. That's a nation state level capability. And so if we're going to emulate something like that, then maybe we should just sign the software and whitelist it to be able to then move past that choke point, emulating that behavior. So just a quick question. I'm going to start with a poll and then we'll interrogate. Does anybody think that it matters if there's a difference semantically between emulation and simulation? Raise your hand if you think yes. Okay, Katie Nichols from MITRE. Yes, I am actually coming back here. So, why?
Simulation implies it's an exact match. Emulation, sort of in the spirit of, but we can never match adversaries exactly. So I prefer emulation rather than simulation.
I love that. Do we have an unlimited supply of people that actually know what they're doing in this space? I'm clear proof we don't. If you ever, again, this is what the bottom looks like, so feel good about yourselves, right? Again, I apologized at the beginning that this was your last Derbycon talk, but your self-esteem will be so much higher as you leave. We have a people problem. We don't just have a people problem on the user side, we have a people problem on our expert side. We need to find a way to quickly be able to bring juniors up and be able to get them going faster. All right, white box versus black box, we talked about that. Defense validation. Katie actually just gave this slide. Wow, she's amazing, really is. If you guys don't follow the coins on Twitter, you're a moron. She really is one of the best and the brightest. I'm actually not that I love you. What was that? Do I have to come back? Yeah, I know. I was just harassing her. Okay. Who here uses an MSSP in their organization? How good are they? They're not good? How do you know they're not good? Do you want me to skip over there? What's that? They have great metrics? Wait, hold on. Is that them self-reporting on themselves? Yeah. Huh. I've also heard of one MSSP, and I won't name names. I think they're here. Who they charged by the number of tickets that they opened on themselves. Like, we're not even back into security now. We're just looking at business practices, and that's a brilliant one. I mean, it is if the customers pay. Sucks for the rest of us. We want to be able to understand. So in terms of metrics, I think what we have today, there's only 3 metrics that I think we can definitively say matter, and they tie back to time. How quickly, this is the purpose of adversarial emulation, is how quickly, because it's about resilience, right? We're in that phase of cybersecurity where resilience is the thing that we say that is most important. And the ability to measure that is a question of time, of how quickly can I identify anomalous, how quickly can I respond, how quickly can I remediate. And then there's some sub-metrics inside of that where you might have something as like, well, when did our tools see it versus when did a human understand that that was something worth interrogating, and then how long did that take? MITRE attack. So sitting next to Katie Nichols is another fantastic individual from MITRE named Adam Pennington. They're never coming to any of my talks again. Who knows the pyramid of pain? You do now, right? Credit to David Bianco. So this, I think, is a great way of looking at it. And going back to, again, Katie really should be giving this talk, apparently, because she summed it up so nicely here, is emulation versus simulation is really a question of scale and how much effort we want to push into these things, of exact versus approximate. The biggest flaw that I see in the way that the industry has responded to MITRE attack, because it's very comprehensive. It's in a nice little like checkbox look. So we just start to look at it like checkboxes. If you're using it like checkboxes, you're not going to get anywhere, because focusing on those particular technical implementations, there are a number of ways to do those. Emulation versus simulation. Behavior versus signature. So threat intelligence today, I would suggest, is mostly, I will tell you statically what I learned yesterday. And by the time I tell you, fundamentally, it's already out of date. Because I can give you signatures. Does malware ever change its signature on the fly? I can also tell you what domains are bad. Does malware ever change its domains that it's going through its C2 on the fly? Or IP addresses, right? And then we get the detailed analyst report. Because at the end of the day, this is what's informing our adversarial understanding to be able to emulate it. Who reads the 40 to 60 page reports? And how easy is it to take that report and action it? He's shaking his head no. Sigh. We need something better. We need something where it is easier for us to take this information in a format for us to be able to do the adversarial emulation. This is where I'm pointing out what I'm talking about, and what we will continue to go through here has a gap where the industry is not giving us the information we need in a way to be able to do this easily. Otherwise, we're back to the expert problem of we can stand up on stage all day and give you opinions, but you know what they say about opinions? I figured, Atlas, you would like jump in on that. Good call. And then the final piece for being able to do adversarial emulation is to take actual adversarial malware and try to neuter it, which is a complex process, of course, of reverse engineering to understand exactly all of the things that it's doing, and then trying to be comfortable to safely employ that back into your own environment. Who's done that? You have? I couldn't, your hand like brief, like, oh, I even thought it was the guy in front of you. Hand was so brief. See, I'm not going for dramatic effect. I'm actually trying to be functional, so I'm running. Tell me about that.
It's very difficult.
Boom! What's your name, by the way? What?
Mike.
Mike. Generic white guy name. Cool. I don't even know why you're videoing. I'm never up there. I am totally fueled by Smirnoff. Woo! MITRE ATT&CK, more detail. MITRE ATT&CK, lots of things. New favorite MITRE ATT&CK, sub-techniques. Credit to Mr. Attack himself, Blake Strom. They really are doing some amazing work. I think it's more the fault of us that we have yet to figure out how to take this and do something more with it. The way I like to think about it is this is a periodic table. It describes elements, just like we do in chemistry. And an attack is a combination of multiple of those elements to describe a full attack. For any of you who have a criticism of the attack framework, first of all, they are incredibly receptive. They are still sitting here after I've been being an asshole. They're wonderful, patient people, but no, really, honestly, I don't work for MITRE, so we're clear, but they really are open, and they have done a lot in terms of pushing this. The thing to understand is whatever your criticisms are, this is now a way for us all to talk easily to discuss what's happening, right? We now have a common vernacular. That's like step one after like admission that you're a drunk. You have a way to be able to talk about it. Step two, we have more steps to go. So the good and the bad, we just talked about this. It's a way of focusing on things behaviorally and being able to discuss those. And over time, going back to that standard deviation question when we take snapshots, it's a great way to visualize effectiveness and understanding as long as we are not focusing it as a checkbox. This is a lot of where we see the abuse, right? The abuse is the use of it, not the framework itself. So, some open source options, also made by MITRE. So I'm going to show two different open source options, and you will see how well they worked, trying to do certain different pieces for emulating particular adversaries. Had some challenge. Some of these things didn't work. In fact, both of them had problems. So don't take this anything more than a nominal perspective, and I will share my slides, so a lot of the detail of what you'll be seeing on those are more just like a snapshot of understanding. By the end of this year, we will push out a report that looks at all of the 20, I think it's 23 different C2 emulation options with high-level pros and cons and guide. So this is just two of them. I promise I was sober when I put this together. All right, so Caldera, first of all, is attacked from day one. It is built in, it is integrated, it is like here is a way to take attack and bring it with adversarial behavior into your environment. And it's open source and actively developed. I think, what, version 2 just came out like this past summer? Yes, okay. The con part of it is it's agent-based. The challenge with agents, so Caldera, I feel, works really well when you're trying to test like a golden image. It works really well in a lab. It's not something you can easily move into a production environment, and a lot of that is because of the kind of resource utilization that is required on that actual endpoint. We'll just note there's some bugs, and I'll show them. And customization was also a challenge. Caldera. So like I said, I'll share these slides so you can walk through all of this in a little bit more detail. But first, we're going to try to build a custom adversary, and we're going to struggle with that. So we try doing that. We use PowerShell to inject the agent, and we just sort of get an unknown error of it doesn't work. Actually, wait, I'll pause here. I did literally try to include to show that like this is like the real world perspective, not just of we're emulating real world, but also the challenges of working with a lot of these tools. Do you want me to cut through that, or do you want to see literally me struggling with trying to get some of these things to work? You want to see me struggle? Okay, so I'm going to hide behind here. Okay, so they have this really convenient thing, like I said, that with the MITRE ATT&CK framework being integrated into it, that I can pull up adversaries. In this case, we're pulling up something called Hunter. You can see all the different phases with the different pieces. Works on Windows, yay. Okay. So we're trying to build a custom piece. And like I said, what's really nice about this, if you notice on these filters here where you're building up the payload, is it's right back into, here's the different column. In that column, here's all the techniques. Here are the sub-techniques available to that. Click, click, click. And it's right there. You can see the contextual code right next to it describing what's happening. So we're building up across the different phases. Here was the bug. All right, so please enter an adversary description of this custom adversary we just built. Did I just enter a name as it prompted me? Yes, I did. Computer, did I just enter a name like it told me to? And the pop-up that keeps popping up there is you have not entered a name. You can't enter a code up there. That's the only place to do this. Kept typing. So we were unable to build a custom adversary for some sort of strange input error. I don't know why. Do you guys know? No, I don't. Yeah, I know. It was really frustrating. So we went with a pre-baked adversary instead of trying to build up one. If you're not aware, they've also been doing periodic evaluations where they take participating EDRs and they are emulating particular adversaries through a combination of Cobalt Strike and Caldera. So for a starting example that's out there published by MITRE, there's APT3 that they did in, I think that published in January. So here is all the code of a pre-baked adversary that it spit out from us pushing this different things. Now we're going to run this on the endpoints. We're going to install the agent and go. One of the things that was a little frustrating here is that a couple of the functions for what the adversary did failed, and there was no error message for why those failed. So that was a little rough. The other thing is that the code also removed all the backslashes for all directories. Turns out computers like that, but they don't like it when you remove them. So I don't know why that happened. Is this good enough struggling for you, Jeff? Okay. Because it's feeling very warm up here. Like, he's supposed to show us adversarial emulation, and he's really doing a semi-decent job. See? I don't know why. This is also the challenge with giving these talks, is you end up only being able to show up at 2 p.m. with what you've fully completed. Not all of the things. So like I said, I do promise by the end of the year we'll be pushing something out, looking at a lot of this in more detail. Next up, all right, there you go. PowerShell and Empire. It's dying. The Python that it is based on has been deprecated, and it is no longer under active support, which is a challenge. PowerShell, why do we love PowerShell from a red team perspective? It's built in. You just gave me the tools, and I ran with it. From a defensive perspective, what's the immediate solution to catching that? What's that? All I have to do is see when you call into my centrally managed instance, right? All I have to do is audit. When you tell me you're here. Like, that's literally it. All I have to do is when you call to use me, just notice that you're not supposed to call to use me because the attacker has to come up and do this. Going back to emulation versus simulation, so this is something that's very popular with the living off the land perspective from a red team view, because why would I bring my own tools to the table? But in terms of the threat landscape, we don't actually see that much PowerShell being used because it's really easy to catch. But from a defensive perspective, moving past the, hey, I am auditing for your unauthorized invocation of PowerShell in my environment, because that's a flag, we need to be looking at the behaviors of what happens if PowerShell is still being used in my environment, which is one of the things that Empire helps do, so that I can be focusing on that PowerShell functionality of what it's doing in my environment as it iterates through the stages to its ultimate mission. All right, so Empire. Okay, we're in. So using the listeners, opening an interpreter, We were having some issues with Meterpreter opening up with an Empire here. Okay. So we're going to use a .bat to launch it. I said I was sober when I was typing. And this was our Meterpreter fail. So moving beyond that. All right, so we're going in and we are going to try again by doing a DLL inject. And here we go. Ooh, backslashes. All right, listeners active. What are you laughing at? Did I typed help? Do I look like I need help? Yeah, no, the intent was that so that you could see all the commands that were available at any particular stage. So as, like I said, when I share the slides afterward, because this goes by really quickly for time purposes, you can see a lot more of what was actually happening in detail. All right, so we're back in Windows with an agent. We're going to use HTTP. I think that there was a problem with one of the protocols before, and we're now in with HTTP as our C2 egress. That is a ton of functionality right there, right? Half of that is PowerShell, half of that is custom Python. So this is the real power of this, is when we're looking at particularly the very specific elements of any sub-technique that I want to do. Empire is a phenomenal option to go to that level of granularity if we have the guidance on what we're emulating to do that. Which, in the purpose of time, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut this part short. Okay, living off the land, we were talking about that. So there is a repository called LULBAS, so living off the lands, binaries and scripts. The challenge with it is it's Windows only. Again, a lot of these things come back to what we make use of in them, and so one of the flaws we see out there is it's tempting to focus on the signature versus the technique of what it's teaching us. All right, so in terms of what we want to emulate, again, I go back to the original premise here of what kind of behaviors are we looking at. The first one, which has particularly struck city governments and municipalities throughout the United States, is ransomware. And that's because all of these city governments are effectively below the cybersecurity poverty line. Has anybody heard that phrase before? Courtesy of Wendy Nather, also one of the smartest people ever. There are haves and have-nots in this space. And unfortunately, all of us as citizens are being served by local government that are have-nots. And ransomware is creating this destruction. Ransomware does it in two ways. First of all, intentionally, where I'm doing that because I want to make money through cryptocurrency. The second is as a decoy, because ransomware can be another way to cause destruction in an environment that makes it look like I'm doing something else. Escalation. Escalation can be done through a combination of social engineering. If you give me my password, then we're good there. All the way to I can use technical methods for being able to use proof of concepts, which is the same way of looking at controls validation or configuration checking for something that's out there. If it's patched, I know that that doesn't work. If it isn't, I know it does. Anyone see the study that came out on the effectiveness of patches? Came out like 2 months ago? You did? It's Fernando, right? Yeah, I remember meeting you in Austin in January.
Yes, perfect. You mean the one from Canna and Scientia on vulnerability scoring? Yes. Okay, yeah, it's not just CVSS 10s.
Turns out patching also introduces errors. Who knew that software developers screwed things up? Patching is not the panacea, but knowing a particular thing can exist at a particular point, again, going back to the CVSS scores, again, this is a concept that's been abused. Because something is a CVSS 10, does that mean I care? Maybe. Who said maybe? I was just over there. Maybe, right? Context. Most user computers do not have direct internet access. Most servers do not have direct internet access. That was the thing that was so interesting about a particular bank that has been in the news in the last few months, was the fact that it was one step for all of that. That was the shocking part. And I think that the insider threat, she did that at like 30 different companies. And when, is that like the number? Can you imagine one person compromised like 30 different companies at that scale and then talked about it on social media? Persistence. So everyone knows what persistence is, right? Like, this is my ability to survive everything from as simple as you've turned your computer off all the way to you've completely rebuilt an image and I'm still there. And then, of course, our favorite, which is credentials. Everyone knows something like Mimikatz, right? There are a ton of ways from pass the hash to different ways to stealing different kinds of credentials. I got like, all right, running out of time here. Network activities, what's going on in the network. So that's, again, where I argue that that's a finite space. You have to talk through that space. There are, of course, out-of-band options. There are a lot of other ways that a threat can get something out of the environment. But when we're talking about 99.99% of attacks, we're just going back through your wires. And I'll just repeat it out loud because the cloud is your friend and your enemy. There was a really cool IoT talk yesterday, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, where he talked about a whole cloud infrastructure for IoT compromise. Worth checking out if that's enough detail to do it, since I don't know his name. Lateral movement. Lateral movement is key because lateral movement is how we're establishing contextual business risk. So understanding, this is going to surprise everyone. Attackers are not omniscient. Most attacks, it's like, all right, I first get a call back in the real world. I'm somewhere. I know kind of who I'm with because I've been targeting them, but I don't know where I am there. And more importantly, not only do I know where I am, I don't know where I want to go. And so it's a question of time and persistence from what am I going to be doing for me to get where I want to go. How long? How do I do that? Lateral movement is the biggest piece to do that. Again, it goes back to access isn't the question. That initial compromise is most likely not where I wanted to go. If you were to pick one target in any organization to go after, person-wise, function, who would it be? The front desk? Sales? Depends on the objective? Fernando, stop. It's hard. What? Help desk. Okay, but help desks are theoretically, technically smart people. That's going to be a harder target. I would argue recruiting. Recruiting is the one function that is required to interact with strangers all the time and open everything they send them. That would be my primary target. But recruiting doesn't give me anything of interest itself, but it got me in. Then we start laterally moving to where we're of interest. Toward a purple team. Purple is great. Yay, purple unicorns. Insert end slide. And insert in slide like we're done. Thanks. Bye. Thank you. Thank you to Dave.